All right, let's jump right into this explainer. So, when you hear the name Thomas Aquinas, what pops into your head? Probably some dusty medieval theologian locked away in a quiet monastery, writing things that have absolutely zero bearing on our modern world, right? Well, today we're going to dive into the source material and reintroduce him, not as some relic of the past, but as a brilliant intellectual rebel. This is the thinker who stepped up to the plate and solved one of history's absolute greatest dilemmas.
Must faith and reason always collide? I mean, today, we kind of just assume science and religion are natural enemies, constantly forced to battle it out for supremacy. But as you'll see, this is a completely false dichotomy. We are going to explore how a 13th century monk looked at this supposed war and completely dismantled the idea that you have to choose between your mind and your beliefs.
Let's set the stage with Part 1, the 13th century crisis.
To really grasp Aquinas' genius, we've got to understand the massive crisis of knowledge going on in 13th century Europe. Up until then, the prevailing Augustinian and Platonic view relied strictly on divine illumination. It was this idea that true knowledge comes heavily through faith, inner spiritual grace, and divine revelation. But suddenly, this established worldview was challenged by a new contender, the Aristotelian view, which was a philosophy that relied purely on human observation, the physical senses, and natural reason.
So why the sudden clash? Well, it was all about the return of Aristotle. His philosophy was making a massive comeback in Western Europe, having been carefully translated and preserved by some incredibly brilliant Islamic and Jewish scholars. And honestly, this sparked absolute panic among traditional thinkers in the church. They were terrified that this highly rational, empirical, and technically pagan philosophy would completely upend Christian doctrine. It was literally an intellectual earthquake.
Which brings us to Part 2. Building the grand synthesis.
Enter Thomas Aquinas. He walks right into the middle of this high-stakes intellectual tug-of-war and decides that instead of picking a side and going to battle, he's going to build a bridge. He didn't just hide behind Christian texts. His grand synthesis boldly embraced philosophy from across the known world. He studied Aristotle from the Greeks, Moses Maimonides from the Jewish tradition, and Avicenna and Averroes from the Muslim world. He proved that his ultimate goal was seeking truth, no matter where it was found or who wrote it down.
Out of this, he formulated what we can call the two wings of truth. You see, Aquinas didn't view faith and reason as rivals competing for the same territory. Instead, he saw them as two overlapping lenses, or as Pope John Paul II beautifully described it centuries later, two wings used to elevate the human spirit to the exact same divine reality. Reason handles the natural world, faith handles the supernatural, but they both point in the exact same direction.
To ground this abstract philosophy a bit, let's unpack a concept called act and potency. Aquinas borrowed and adapted this directly from Aristotle to explain that change in the universe isn't just magic. Potency is simply the capacity for a thing to be real, like a tiny acorn having the potential to become a massive oak tree. Act is it actually being that tree. Change is just a real capacity within a thing becoming actualized. It's a perfectly rational, logical explanation of the physical world that doesn't contradict a divine creator.
Let's move on to Part 3. Rejecting the double truth.
Now, this tackles a really fascinating myth in the science versus religion debate, something that even cropped up in later historical plays about Galileo's famous trial, the doctrine of double truth. Basically, this is the bewildering idea that two completely contradicting truths can exist side by side, like something can be objectively true in science, but totally false in theology. Some thinkers tried to use this as a clever loophole to avoid getting into trouble, but Aquinas? No way. He utterly dismantled it. He absolutely refused to accept that reality was split in two.
His whole argument hinges on this one simple, incredibly powerful quote: "Truth cannot contradict truth." Because human reason and divine revelation both originate from the exact same source, the same creator, Aquinas argued that a genuine scientific fact can literally never conflict with genuine faith. If they seem to clash, well, it just means either our science is flawed or our understanding of theology is wrong.
All right, let's check out Part 4, the 5 ways.
So if Aquinas is going to claim that reason and faith are in perfect harmony, he's kind of obligated to prove it, right? And he did, by laying out his famous Quinque Viae, or the 5 ways. He wanted to demonstrate that you don't even need to start with faith to deduce that a creator exists. You can actually do it through pure, observable logic and reason.
Just by observing the natural world around us, he synthesized these 5 proofs. He noted that motion requires a prime mover to get the ball rolling. The chain of cause and effect, that requires an uncaused causer. Contingent beings, which rely on other things to exist, point to a necessary being.
The gradation of perfections we see in the world points to an ultimate perfection. And finally, the sheer intricate design of nature points straight to a guiding intelligence. He used pure empirical observation of the physical world to logically point to the divine.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, Faith and Reason Today.
You might be sitting there asking yourself, okay, but why does a 13th century philosophical framework actually matter for us right now, in the 21st century? Well, think about our modern, highly polarized landscape. Secular science and religious belief are constantly forced into separate, hostile corners. You are constantly told you have to pick a side. But Aquinas' integrated Thomistic worldview, where both disciplines seek to answer the fundamental questions about our existence, is the exact antidote we need to this modern fragmentation.
And the lasting impact of his work is just immense. His radical synthesis was so undeniably powerful that the Catholic Church eventually embraced it as their foundational bedrock. Centuries after he lived, his philosophy was still being championed in major encyclicals, like Pope Leo XIII's Aeterni Patris, which basically urged the world to return to Aquinas' unified, harmonious vision of reality.
That brings us to this truly resonant quote from the 1998 encyclical Fides et Ratio. Faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. It perfectly echoes Aquinas' original thesis: truth is one. Science helps us understand the how of the universe, while theology and philosophy help us understand the why. You need both wings to fly.
Will you use both wings to seek the truth? As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. If a medieval friar could bridge the absolute greatest intellectual divide of his entire era just by embracing diverse, opposing ideas, how might his dual lenses of reason and faith change the way you view our complex, beautiful universe today? Thanks for exploring this with us, and keep seeking the truth.